The 2Notes Reload 2 is out, and this thing is a beast. It really is a Swiss Army knife for your amp setup. And I'm not gonna go into detail with everything that it does, but I do wanna show you a couple ways that I personally would use the Reload 2. At its core, it's a first-class reactive load box with true continuous active attenuation. For instance, when I want to use certain amps at bedroom volumes, like a 100-watt Marshall without a master volume, but I still wanted to retain the feel of a fully cranked amp, the Reload 2 works perfectly. By the way, each channel, and there's 2 channels, can handle up to 200 watts each, so it's very capable. It can also do the inverse, so it's kind of like a power amplifier unto itself. So you can take, say, a small wattage amp like a 5-watt amp and make it sound louder like a 100-watt amp and use it on gigs with loud drummers. It's got multi-impedance capability, so you can use 4, 8, or 16 ohm amps. There's also a stereo effects loop, which is kind of my favorite feature, so you can run your time-based effects after the amp before the speakers. Along with the 2 cabinet outs, there are 2 DI outputs for silent recording or even reamping. The Reload 2 also comes with the 2Notes Genome plugin, so you can use tons of their virtual cabinets in your recording software. Again, tons of features and so many ways you can use it, but here are some of my favorite ways. So the first way I would probably use the Reload 2 is if I wanted to run a stereo setup with stereo effects. And what's great about this is you can do stereo with just 1 amp. Before I would have to use 2 separate guitar amps to run a stereo rig, but the Reload 2 solves this. Now thankfully they include a pamphlet that has some of the most common setup scenarios that you might want to use. And for this I used the mono source to feed a stereo effects loop setup. So for this I've got my divided by 13 amp right here hooked up to the Reload 2. The Reload 2 is feeding 2 separate cabinets. I've got this 212 amplified Nation, and then I've got the 412 Marshall, and I've got the effects loop in the back hooked up according to that diagram I just showed you, and it's going to this pedal on the floor. It's a Strymon Dig stereo delay, and I have it dialed in with a ping pong type delay, so the delays will bounce from side to side. The 2 cabinets are mic'd individually, and I have them panned hard left and right. So if you have headphones or earbuds, I totally recommend listening with those. So here's how it sounds. Now I gotta say, just sitting here between the 2 cabinets and hearing the delays in stereo is amazing. Now you can't really tell through this video, but I have the amp turned up to gigging volume, but because of the Reload, I'm able to dial it in, so it's actually pretty quiet in my studio. So really quickly, the way that I would dial in an amp is, there's an amp in level, and there is a middle green light, and then the left and the right lights are kind of telling you if you need to increase or decrease. So you don't want it to peak. If it's hitting the right light, you might want to turn down the amp input level, just to kind of optimize the signal going into the Reload. So that's pretty good. See how it's just hitting the green and not going over? So the way I have this set up is this side, channel A, is going to the 212 Amp Nation cabinet. Channel B is going to the 412 Marshall. And what I like about these big knobs, so these are kind of like the volume that's going to each cabinet. What I like about it is that these are notched. And because it's notched, it makes it really easy to make sure that both cabinets are getting the exact same volume. So a couple of the controls that I want to show you on these channels. At the very top here, you have a switch to switch between the line input or the amp input. I'll show you the line input a little bit later, but right now, because we are running the divided by 13 amp, we are switched to the amp input. The big knobs, of course, is the volume for the cabinets. There's also a smaller output knob, and that's for the output volume when you are hooked up via DI, and I'll show you that when I have this hooked up to my recording rig. But one thing I really like is each channel has a depth and presence knob. So a lot of times when you attenuate an amp, you lose certain frequencies, especially when you're playing at a really low volume, like a bedroom level playing or late night playing. And sometimes you want to add a little bit more bottom end, which is what the depth knob is for, or a little more top end, which is kind of what the presence knob does. And I really like that option. And again, that is per channel, so you can adjust that on each cabinet. Another interesting feature is this Mojo button. So the Mojo button, according to 2Notes, it's supposed to give you a high power feel even at low volumes. And all I can say is that the amp feels a little bit livelier when the Mojo button is engaged. So this is the Mojo button off on both cabinets. When they're both engaged, I turned up the gain a little bit. Let's see if it comes out a little bit better. Engaged. It does something with the low mids. It makes it more even sounding, I guess. I don't know, it just sounds better to my ears when it's engaged. Let's hear a little bit of lead tone with the stereo delay. I've got a overdrive pedal. It's a Crazy Tube Circuits Venus tube driver. Now I can see that because of the volume boost or the distortion, the amp in level is kind of getting too hot, so I can tune it down. Oh, that sounds so cool. Pretty awesome. So now I've added a secondary stereo effect. I've got the Eventide Tricera chorus, which is a tri-stereo chorus, very 80s. So combined with the dig delay, I should note that there is a ton of functionality with the effects loop on the Reload 2. You can use it with regular guitar pedals, you can use it with line level rack effects. You've got dry-wet mix control per channel. There's dual mono mode, there's stereo mode, it's foot switchable. So these effects that I have running, the stereo delay and the stereo chorus, are all running after the amp's power section before the speakers, which is pretty cool because that's kind of the way that they did it in the 80s when they had those big, LA session rack setups. Another way to use this as a live stereo solution is with a modeler, something like I have, a Neural DSP Quad Cortex. There's actually 2 1/4-inch line input jacks in the back, so you can hook up things like modelers or preamps or line level stuff. And essentially then you're using the Reload 2 as like a stereo power amp. And this is where these switches that I showed you earlier come into play. So for each channel, we're gonna just switch it over to line. And what's cool about the switch is I can keep both audio sources hooked up, the amp and the Neural DSP Quad Cortex, and just switch between them as needed. So I've got an 80s style patch dialed into the Neural DSP. Haven't changed anything on the cab settings except for the line input. And in my Quad Cortex preset, I actually have delays that are ping-ponged as well, so you should be hearing the delays going left to right, left to right. So when I'm using a modeler, I've noticed that I do prefer the mojo to be turned off since it's not really a real tube amp. And it kind of gives me the most flat response. So I have the depth and the presence turned all the way off. So I think that would give me the most flat response. I'm going to turn up the volume a little bit. So in certain situations, I might want a flat response, but I love the ability that I can increase the depth of the presence per cabinet and as needed. So maybe I want a little more bottom end. Or all the bottom end. Or keep it flat. Let's go halfway. Same with the presence. Maybe I want a little bit more clarity. Let's dial in a lead tone. And if I want to get really crazy, I still have my Strymon delay hooked up through the effects loop. So I can actually have two delays on the Quad Cortex patch. And then this is the Strymon pedal. So I kind of have it, what is this, almost like a dotted eighth feel. So here is the bass delay. And it's ping-ponging. And then I've got a secondary ping-pong delay here. So this kind of stereo setup is great for live use if you want to go stereo. It's great for the studio actually, and it's also great for just like jamming at home and having this really wide sound. I can get this down really quiet. I don't know if it's going to come out on the track. I mean, that is just like whisper quiet. I'm hearing more guitar string noise. But it just sounds so full, especially when it's stereo. It sounds so good in the room. So if anything, this is just like a glorious stereo effects indulgence, you know, jam setup. So I've got the amp switched back on again. And something that I never thought about before, but I think this would actually make a really cool cabinet switcher. So because you can basically shut off the signal going to whichever cabinet, you know, if I just wanted the 212 cabinet, or if I just wanted the 412 cabinet, So I can either combine the cabinets or use them separately, which is kind of really cool, especially in the studio. So for instance, in the studio, if you wanted to A/B two different speaker cabinets, you could. It would also come in handy for people like me. If I was demoing two different speakers or two different cabinets, this would be perfect. So next, I'm gonna show you another way that I would use the Reload 2 here in my studio. So now I'm gonna show you how I would use the Reload 2 in a home recording setup for silent recording that is without the use of speaker cabinets. So basically running an amp directly to the audio interface and using things like speaker sims or plugins that have speaker simulation or IRs. And since we have two channels to work with, I'm going to show you two different ways I would do this. So channel A, I've got a line out going to this 2 notes Opus, which I demoed in the past. And if you want to see that video, I'll put a link here or in the description. But the Opus has cab simulation as well as amp simulation, but we're only going to be using the cab sims built in. And then from the Opus, I'm going directly to my audio interface where I'm recording. And for this, I'm using my Friedman twin sister, set to kind of dirty. And here's how it sounds. So this cab sim patch that I'm using has a little bit of slap echo. So you can hear a little bit of room noise. But if I don't like that sound, I can always just change the preset to get some different cabinets. Or this one. Actually, I kind of like the one with the slap. And I can still use the features on the Reload to kind of tone shape, such as the depth and the presence. A little more presence. A little more depth. And also, I've got the effects loop running mono this time. I've got a Keeley Halo. Also got a Strymon Cloudburst. Pretty cool. So just a note, when you are doing this kind of silent recording setup and you're using the line outs, you're using the output, the small output knob instead of this cab knob. Now the other way I want to show you how I would go about recording direct is on channel B, I actually have this going directly to my audio interface. And then if you see here on the screen, I have a Logic session opened up. And on the track, I actually have the 2 notes Genome plugin loaded up to give me some cab sim options. So if I bypass the plugin, this is what the amp sounds direct into the audio interface. Doesn't sound that great. That's why we need to use a cab sim or IRs. So in Genome, I just have this Friedman 412 G12 cabinet loaded up using the Dyne IR cab, and here's how it sounds. But obviously I got all these cabinets to choose from. We can try this Phil X Mars 412. Or we can try something crazy like an 8-inch speaker that Phil X has. Let's try a 210. what's cool about using the Genome plugin is that it's kind of non-destructive, right? So I can record a guitar part, and if I don't like the cabinet sound, I can always change it after the fact. I can also add additional plugins like time-based effects. So Genome comes with a bunch of effects. Let's try the ping pong delay. So I don't even have to worry about putting pedals in the effects loop of the Reload. I can put all of that stuff in the plugin and manipulate it after I've recorded the part. Tremolo. So you're gonna get a lot of flexibility when you're recording direct this way. But beyond the stuff that I just showed you of the ways that I would use the Reload, there's a bunch of other ways to wire this up and use it. Like I said, it's like a Swiss Army knife. For instance, maybe my setup would be one channel will go direct using the Genome plugin, and then maybe another channel I can have running to an actual cabinet in the room mic'd up. So that way I'll have a real amp recorded, but also I'll have the flexibility of using the DI track to manipulate further if I want to have a secondary amp sound with a different, cab. So yeah, the Reload 2 is quite an innovative device. It's really practical for my use, and I'm sure you guys are going to figure out tons of different ways to use this. So if you want more information on the Reload 2 and how to buy it, I'll put a link down in the description. And if you want to see more videos like this, gear demos or guitar lessons, click that subscribe button. I'm Ronquillo, and I'll see you in the next video.